She was invisible to most guests, a quiet hotel maid, moving between rooms with practiced grace. But one phone call, in a language no one expected, changed everything. In front of a powerful millionaire, her voice revealed a hidden world, one she never meant to share. Within moments, curiosity turned to scrutiny, and then to something far more dangerous. Because in that gilded hotel, her worth would be measured not by her work, but by the color of her skin. What followed would expose an ugly truth, and leave everyone asking, how could this still happen today? It was a quiet Tuesday morning in Amsterdam's old city center, where tourists flooded the cobblestone streets and the air carried the smell of fresh coffee from corner cafes. For Naomi, the hotel's head maid, mornings began before the sun broke over the rooftops. She moved with precision, folding linens, polishing brass handles, checking every detail twice. Guests rarely saw her, but they noticed her work: spotless rooms, perfectly made beds, and fresh flowers in every vase. To most, she was just part of the scenery, a uniform, a name on a cleaning roster. But behind her calm demeanor was a woman fluent in 4 languages, with a mind as sharp as the creases she pressed into the hotel sheets. That morning felt no different from the hundreds before it. Naomi made her way to the top floor, humming softly, unaware that a single ringing phone in one of the suites would soon draw her into a moment that would test not just her composure, but her place in a world that still measured people by the color of their skin. Naomi had just finished fluffing the last pillow when the phone rang. It wasn't her place to answer. Staff were trained to leave guest calls untouched, but the room was empty, the receiver only a few steps away. Out of instinct, she picked it up. "Goedemorgen, mevrouw," she said, her Dutch crisp and fluid. There was a pause on the other end, as if the caller hadn't expected that voice, that accent. She listened, replying calmly, offering assistance. When she hung up, the air felt heavier. She turned and saw him, the man she'd only glimpsed in the hotel lobby before. He was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes narrowed in a way that wasn't curiosity, it was appraisal. This was Victor Haldane, a millionaire whose name carried weight in business circles. He didn't speak, not immediately. His gaze swept over her, lingering too long, the kind of look that stripped away humanity and turned a person into something to be evaluated. "You speak Dutch?" he finally asked, as if the words themselves were strange in his mouth. Naomi nodded, keeping her posture professional. "And English, French, and German," she added. His eyebrows lifted, not in admiration, but in surprise, tinged with something colder. "Interesting," he said, the word flat, almost dismissive. He stepped closer, close enough that Naomi could smell the faint tang of expensive cologne. "Tell me, where did you learn?" She felt the question wasn't about language at all. It was about her. About how someone like her could possibly sound like someone like him. Over the next hours, the encounters multiplied. He happened to be in the hallway when she passed. He called the front desk, asking for her by name to deliver towels or adjust the curtains, things he could easily do himself. Each time, there was the same undercurrent, curiosity laced with disbelief, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. But curiosity, Naomi knew, could turn quickly into something dangerous. By the 3rd day, whispers began among the staff. The receptionist mentioned that Mr. Haldane had asked about Naomi's background, where she was from, how long she had been in the Netherlands, whether she had family there. The questions were framed politely, but the implication was clear: he wanted to know if she belonged. One afternoon, Naomi overheard 2 guests in the lounge. "She's just the maid," one said, lowering his voice but not enough. "I bet she's not even legal." The words lodged deep, sharper than she wanted to admit. She'd worked in that hotel for years, longer than some of the managers. She paid her taxes, held her work permits, built a quiet life. But to them, all of that could vanish under one suspicion. The tension deepened when a mistake, one Naomi hadn't made, was pinned on her. A missing silver cufflink from Haldane's suite. Security called her in, their questions polite but pointed. She explained where she'd been, what she'd done, but the room felt charged, every answer weighed like evidence. As she left the office, she saw Haldane standing near the elevator, watching. No smile, no nod. Just that same measured stare. From then on, every shift felt like walking on glass. She could feel invisible eyes tracking her, feel conversations pause when she entered a room. Even the simple act of answering a guest's question became loaded. Was this person genuinely asking or testing her? One evening, while delivering fresh linens to Haldane's suite, she found him seated at the desk, papers spread before him. He looked up, gestured for her to come in. "Sit," he said, not a request, but an order. She hesitated, then stepped forward, standing instead. "I've been looking into you," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. "You're unusual." The word hung in the air, sour. Naomi forced herself to meet his gaze. "I'm just doing my job, sir." "That's the thing," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "People like you usually aren't in places like this." She felt the blood rise in her face, but kept her tone even. "And yet, here I am." A slow smile spread across his face, not friendly, but calculating. "For now," he said. Those two words replayed in her mind long after she left the room. For now. They weren't a statement. They were a warning. That night, she barely slept. The city sounds faded into the background as her thoughts raced. She'd worked too hard, built too much to have it all undone by a man's suspicion, or his ego. But the next morning, things escalated further. A formal complaint had been filed about her conduct. The manager avoided eye contact as he read from the paper, his voice tight. It accused her of being overfamiliar with guests, of lingering in rooms unnecessarily. She knew exactly whose words those were. She tried to explain, but the hotel's policies left little room for defense. An investigation would follow, during which her shifts would be reduced. Less work meant less income, and less visibility meant fewer chances to prove her worth. As she left the office, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the creeping sense that this was no longer about her job. It was about erasing her presence entirely. She considered speaking out, going to the labor board, but the thought of retaliation loomed. She'd seen it happen to others, complaints quietly disappear, and the complainants vanish from the schedule soon after. Then, late that afternoon, she received a sealed envelope slipped under her locker door. No name, just her first initial in black ink. Inside was a note in neat handwriting. "Be careful. He's not just a guest." Her pulse quickened. She scanned the room, but no one was looking her way. Who wrote it? What did they mean? And what exactly did Haldane want from her? The note in Naomi's locker was still burning in her pocket when the call came from reception. "Mr. Haldane has requested you in his suite. Immediately." Requests from VIP guests weren't optional. She smoothed her uniform, forced her breathing steady, and made her way to the top floor. The hallway outside his room was silent, the plush carpet swallowing her footsteps. She knocked. "Come in," his voice called, low, deliberate. He was standing near the window when she entered, the city lights spread behind him like a glittering backdrop. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the table, and beside it, a manila folder. "Close the door," he said. She hesitated. The air in the room felt heavy, charged. Still, she stepped inside and let the latch click shut. "I've been learning a lot about you," he began, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. He opened the folder and slid out a stack of papers. Birth records. Employment history. Immigration file. Naomi's stomach dropped. How had he gotten those? Those files weren't public, they were locked behind government systems. He watched her reaction with something close to satisfaction. "You see, people like me, we can get answers. And people like you can lose everything with the wrong kind of attention." Her hands clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms. "Why are you doing this?" Because, he said, stepping closer, I don't believe you belong here. And I don't like questions without answers. The words landed like blows. She had heard variations before, subtle doubts, polite exclusions, but never so blunt, never so threatening. He circled her like a predator, pausing just behind her shoulder. I could make one phone call, he murmured, and you'd be gone by morning. No job. No home. No chance to explain. Naomi's breath came faster, but she forced her voice to stay steady. And what would that prove? That I can, he said simply. The weight of it pressed down on her, the imbalance of power, the cold confidence of someone who knew the system was tilted in his favor. He didn't have to be right. He only had to speak, and the machinery of bureaucracy and prejudice would do the rest. Then he dropped the final blow. I've already spoken to management. They'll be reviewing your position. I suggested they look into possible misconduct. You'll hear from them soon. Her vision tunneled. She had worked years to build a life here, every step uphill, every opportunity earned twice over. And now, in a matter of minutes, it could all vanish. Not because of a mistake. Not because of the truth. But because a man with money had decided she didn't fit his idea of who belonged. She thought of her mother's words from years ago, when they first arrived in the Netherlands, they'll smile to your face and doubt you behind your back. So you work harder. You stand straighter. You give them nothing to use against you. But what could she do when the attack wasn't hidden anymore? When it was happening in plain sight? Naomi took a step toward the door, determined to leave before he could see her break. But Haldane's voice followed her. Careful, Naomi. You don't want this to get ugly. She didn't turn around. She couldn't. Every instinct screamed to run, to disappear before he could strip away the last of her dignity. But as her hand touched the door, she realized, running wouldn't save her. It would only confirm every assumption he'd made. The next morning, she arrived at work to find 2 security guards waiting by the staff entrance. Their presence alone sent a clear message. The manager's voice was clipped as he told her she was suspended pending investigation. She asked for the reason. He avoided her eyes. A guest has made serious allegations. And just like that, she was escorted out through the side door, past colleagues who stared but said nothing. The street outside felt colder than it should. Her phone buzzed with messages she couldn't bring herself to read. Halfway down the block, she glanced back at the hotel. In one of the upper windows, she saw a silhouette. Tall. Motionless. Watching. Her chest tightened. It wasn't just about the job anymore. This was about survival in a place where the wrong accusation could erase you, no matter the truth. She stopped walking, the note in her pocket crinkling between her fingers. Be careful. He's not just a guest. The words replayed in her mind, sharper now. If he wasn't just a guest, what was he? Naomi's suspension lasted weeks. Every day, she waited for a call that might decide the course of her life. A decision not based on her skill, her dedication, or her record, but on the word of a man who had already decided she didn't belong. In the end, she was quietly reinstated. There was no apology, no acknowledgement that the allegations had been unfounded. The hotel simply could not substantiate the claims. Her hours were restored, her uniform pressed, her duties resumed. But everything had changed. Because while she had kept her job, she had lost something harder to reclaim, her sense of safety. Every shift felt different now. Every guest's glance carried a question. Every sudden phone call from management made her stomach knot. She worked as before, but her trust in the system, in the idea that hard work could shield her from prejudice, had been shattered. She never saw Haldane again. He checked out before she returned, leaving no trace except the shadow he'd cast over her life. But the damage lingered in ways that wouldn't show up on a report or in an investigation file. It lived in the quiet moments, when she hesitated before knocking on a door, or when she caught herself avoiding eye contact with certain guests, not out of guilt, but out of exhaustion. Because this wasn't just about one man in one hotel suite. This was about the ease with which power and prejudice could intersect, and how quickly a life could be upended when the two decided to aim at the same target. It was about the countless time stories like Naomi's played out in different uniforms, in different workplaces, with different names, and how often they were erased before anyone could hear them. Racism doesn't always arrive wearing a hood or shouting slurs. Sometimes, it wears a suit, smiles politely, and uses the language of concern and procedure. Sometimes it hides in the space between suspicion and assumption, between what can be proved and what can be believed. And in those spaces, lives are quietly altered, opportunities vanish, and dignity is stripped away, without a single headline to mark the loss. Naomi kept going. She had to. But she carried the truth of what had happened, even if no one else wanted to name it. And in that truth lay the most painful question: if it could happen so easily to her, with all her hard-earned stability, how many others had been erased completely, their stories never told? The answer, she knew, was too many. Far too many. And so, this story becomes more than Naomi's. It becomes a mirror, reflecting the quiet, calculated ways injustice moves through the world, and the silence that allows it to keep moving. The question is, now that you've seen it, what will you do?